Now, moving on to question 13. For this question, you want to know all about exponential equations. So, for exponential equations, you have your basic exponential structure, which is a times b to the x. So, a is your starting amount, b is how it changes, and x is the number of times that all happens. So, for instance, you might start with $1,000 and then double it a certain number of times. And this can give you a model for how to figure out how much your money is going to grow. On the other hand, you need to know that in the exponent, you could have a fraction or you could have multiplication. The fraction kind of says, instead of saying we're going to start at a certain amount and change it a certain amount every year, this would be like saying every 3 years, x over 3, or every 3 months or hours or whatever time period you're working with in a given question. On the other hand, if it's multiplied right there, that's like saying it's going to happen 3 times per every time period, every year or month or whatever. And the whole x over 3 versus 3x thing, that kind of rears its head in linear equations and other areas as well. But for exponential equations, it's particularly important. So, according to that, coming back to question 13, we know that whatever's going on here, it's starting at 500. It's being multiplied by 0.5. So it's halving. We're getting half of it every time. And the number of times is t over 12. Now, t is the number of millimeters. So it's not even time, but it's the same model. So for every millimeter below the surface, something happens, or here, for every 12 millimeters. So it's starting at, well, first of all, F is the intensity. So it's starting at an intensity of 500. The intensity gets multiplied by 1/2. So you get half the intensity. And that happens once it goes down by half for every 12 millimeters in depth, every 12 millimeters below the surface. So, according to that model, what's the estimated number of particles when it is at the surface? In other words, 0 millimeters below the surface. So, all we really had to do here was plug in t equals 0. So, that'll give us 500 times 0.5 to the 0. Now, anything to the 0 power equals 1. So, this whole thing is equal to 1, and it's 500 times 1, and the answer is 500. So here we really didn't have to use some of that deeper exponential equation stuff, but it's still good to know it. You'll need it on other questions, and it'll also give you a sense of confidence on this question.